We are taking it down south for our third episode as we got a park that has the unique distinction of being located in not just one, but two states. Just outside of Charlotte, where North Carolina meets South Carolina, there's a Cedar Fair Park that has experienced significant investment and growth over the last 15 years. This park certainly wastes no time making an impression with 14 thrilling roller coasters, including one that is in the top 5 tallest roller coasters in the world. I'm talking about Carowinds, today's subject of the Coaster Broadcast Podcast. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Coaster Broadcast Podcast, the podcast that not only gets you excited for your next trip, but gives you nostalgic memories of what makes these parks great for travelers and thrill seekers alike. I am your host, Sedric Granger, and it is a great day to talk about a warmer place after being up north for the last few episodes. Especially since we get to talk about Carowinds, which is a park that marked one of my first ever solo road trips that I ever had. I attended the park in March of 2022 and did a 2-for-1 trip as I traveled from Athens, Ohio to Greenville, South Carolina to meet my friend who goes to school at Mississippi State to watch an NCAA March Madness session where I got to see not one but 2 famous blue blood teams, including Michigan State led by Tom Izzo and Duke led by Coach K. Then after that, we all went our separate ways and I went north for a 2-day trip at Carowinds. This was a park that I only saw in YouTube videos and images, and now just like that, the roller coasters were right in the flesh, or I guess more accurately, right there in the steel and wood right in front of me. Having the bright teal track of Fury 325 wrapped around the entrance with the bright red Intimidator hills to your left, it is absolutely breathtaking. It really set a quick tone on how great of a day this park was going to give me. Now I want you all to feel a little bit about how I felt as I was entering the park. So let's begin by immersing you in the sounds of Carowinds. There is nothing like the sensory experiences of an amusement park. For Carowinds, it was the smell of the amazing Carolina barbecue in the air, the happy chatter of the many families enjoying all the attractions, and of course the roar of the roller coasters speeding around the respective tracks of various colors from teal to red to gray to blue to brown. Now that I got you in the mindset of Carowinds, it's time for us to talk about some coasters. So let's jump into our next segment, the High Five. The High Five segment is themed to the rare roller coaster element known as a high five, where racing or dueling roller coasters bank towards each other, creating the appearance of the two sides high-fiving. For this segment, we get to talk about 5 roller coasters that stood out to me at Carowinds. And of course, with there being 14 different roller coasters, I would love to give a shout out to all 14. However, we like to limit it to just 5 here so that we can go really in depth with each of them. And it really is no surprise which coaster is going to start off our list. It's going to be none other than this exciting Giga coaster.
It's insane. I cannot believe I'm at Carowinds. I've dreamed of coming to this park forever, and look at what's in front of me. It's the Hive Dive of Fury 325, themed to the Charlotte Hornets and its teal color scheme. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's either this gonna be number 1 or Steel Vengeance. It's that close. I need a few more rides, but that was absolutely insane. How about that to start the coaster season? No coasters are open up north, so you got to go down south. And we love it. Fury 325.
When it comes to Fury 325, it is the roller coaster that stands out among the rest. Some call it Fury 325. Some people call it Fury 325. Well, when you look at the statistics, 325 is all over the place. First of all, this is a B&M Giga Steel roller coaster, and as the name suggests, it is 325 feet in height, 325 feet in drop, 81-degree angle, so it has a pretty good steepness. It's also the fourth tallest roller coaster at the time of recording. That won't stay, as there's a new roller coaster called Falcon's Flight, but it'll still remain firmly in that top 5. Fury 325 has a maximum speed of 95 miles per hour, and on a hot day, it is known to get up to 100 miles per hour, according to the locals. It also is one of the longest roller coasters at 6,602 feet of track, and also is impressively 3 minutes and 25 seconds long. So again, that 325, you see that in many ways, whether it's the feet, it's the height, the drop, or of course the time of how long you're on the roller coaster in terms of duration. And this coaster, of course, opened in 2015, and it really represented the turning of the page of Carowinds getting good investments and a coaster that could be known as the top roller coaster in the entire South. So the ride experience starts with a 325-foot lift hill and drop. You got multiple high-speed bank turns. You got something called a treble clef turnaround, which is a pretty fun turnaround, into something called a hive dive, which was this really themed tunnel that had some hexagon patterns that you like to see in beehives or hornet hives. It's kind of the overall theme to it. It's got 4 airtime hills and also has a nice long helix. So in terms of getting to it, when you enter the park, you go out pretty far straight, and then you take a hard right, right around where Vortex is and where towards the Hurler roller coaster. And then once you turn, you'll see the big Fury 325 entrance. And this ride has one of the best logos I've ever seen. You get to see the logo of Fury 325 in all of its glory, with the nice hornet on there and a metallic silver. And then you see the roller coaster skying up the lift hill with its metallic silver trains, teal track, lime green accents, and then white supports. It's a really aesthetically pleasing ride, especially during the daytime. It shines super bright, and during the night, the neon lighting becomes the big factor that you get to see with Fury 325. And with Giga roller coasters, it is something that is used basically as a marketing tool by Cedar Fair. We talked a little bit about it with Orion in our Kings Island episode, but when you have a coaster over 300 feet, it's really easy to market that because, wow, that's a really tall level, and it's kind of different from, your hyper coasters, which are 200 to 299 feet, and then also you got stratas that are 400 to 499 feet. But when you have a coaster like Fury 325 with such a long layout, great length, great speed, it's one of those ones that has the ability to be famous in the area. It also provides a very smooth ride, too. It does pack some intensity, but it's not overly intense to the point where it's not approachable for the average guest. I feel like anybody can ride this roller coaster and have a good time, even though it is rather fast and it does have a lot of intensity in terms of just the speed and the wind that you're feeling in your face. The ride is absolutely butter smooth. It runs really well. And again, it's one of those rides that's so famous for a good reason. So famous, in fact, that it actually received a Golden Ticket Award, which goes to the nation's top roller coaster. It didn't just win one, it's won multiple over the years as well, too. So it's showcasing that it's getting the recognition that it deserves. Then furthermore, the name itself is kind of a reference to the NBA. So locally, there's a team called the Charlotte Hornets, and I find it really cool whenever you have roller coaster names that have some sort of reference to the local franchise. So we took a look at Raging Bull in our last episode, which kind of references the Chicago Bulls. In this case, we get a team that references the Charlotte Hornets. So another NBA team getting some love. And that teal color is actually the same teal color that the Charlotte Hornets wear in their uniform. So I think it's really cool to see that connection. And also Charlotte has utilized kind of that light green as an accent color before. Usually their purple is known as their second color, but that light green also kind of a nod to that team. It also represents something that a lot of parks have done. We look at Cedar Point, you see Gatekeeper as the ride that revitalized the front entrance. And Cedar Fair, they did the same thing when they built Fury 325. With Carowinds, this roller coaster has revitalized the entrance, where it was kind of a bland sort of run-of-the-mill entrance, and now you have the roller coaster weaving and bobbing and rolling all around the entrance. There's a lot of like nice grass fields where people can kind of sit down and you can see the roller coaster fly by and feel the wind of the speed of the ride going over top of you. You have the hive dive element, which I told you about, that little tunnel. Well, there's actually a bridge over the top of it with some glass on the side so that you can be able to see the roller coaster as it speeds through its treble clef and then up into its airtime hill. So it's awesome to have that path interaction, which I think is an underrated quality for roller coasters. If you can have some path interaction, it does a great job of getting the guests super hyped for your ride, and Fury 325 does just that. I think this also represents an idea of designing a signature coaster. So we've seen amusement parks, especially in the Cedar Fair chain, go for this, where they try to have that signature roller coaster that the ride is going to be known for, that the park, I should say, is going to be known for. You look at King's Dominion with I-305. Unfortunately, though, the intensity of I-305 has made it not very popular with the general public, and it usually has very short lines. You're not getting a ton of people riding that roller coaster, and it's disappointing because when you invest 20 plus 25 million or 30 million dollars worth of money into this roller coaster, it needs to be a signature ride. It needs to be something that people are going to continue coming from all over to experience this roller coaster. And they knocked it out of the park with Fury 325. The B&M model and the B&M aesthetic is such an approachable aesthetic as well. It looks really cool as it goes over the entrance. You have a nod to a local sports team, and it just is such a great roller coaster to have as the first impression ride that you see. You can see it off of the interstate and off of the exits and everything like that because it's so tall and it zooms up there. It's also near an airport, and you see planes kind of going by it not too far away from the flight path, but it feels like the roller coaster is just as high as the planes that are going over there as well too. So it's really awesome to see, even just from the guests that I got to talk to and the other people that have been fans of the park for a while. It always seems to be that ride that if any kids go to Carowinds with their school for like band trips or anything like that, this always becomes the infamous ride where it's like, oh, who's going to be brave enough to ride the Fury 325? You want a roller coaster like that at the park, and it really can make for great memories for people when they do that. I really consider this roller coaster the magnum opus of Bollinger and Mabillard. That's what B&M stands for, if you don't know. They're the roller coaster company that made Fury 325, and they really knocked it out of the park with this roller coaster that still remains firmly in my top 5 favorite roller coasters of all time. It is number 2, and it is a fantastic ride to begin our High Five segment.
Calling baseball for a team in Southern Ohio. I think they're called the Copperheads. Well, here's Copperhead Strike. There it is in all its glory with its inversions here. We got a little bit of blitzy action, it looks like, here on this Mack multi-launch coaster. Got some loops. Love to see it. Hope we get one of these at Kings Island soon. But next up is Copperhead Strike. Here's Copperhead Strike with all the loops and stuff like that. This is absolutely terrific. This is gonna be crazy. We're out here at Copperhead Strike. Look at the theming around here. The orange, you got 2 loop-de-loops. Love to see it. Got to love those vertical loops. Oh, there's the launch and there's the loop. This ride indeed does strike. It's Copperhead Strike, baby. Absolutely loved it. So good that I'm gonna go and do it again. They had some good ejectors, some good floaters, some good hang time. Love to see it. Love that logo. That's sick.
For our next roller coaster in the High Five segment, we turn to Copperhead Strike. This is a Mack multi-launch steel roller coaster that is 82 feet in height, and even though the height's not the tallest, it sure does pack a punch with a maximum speed of 50 miles per hour, 3,255 feet of track, with a total duration of 2 minutes and 24 seconds. This is one of the newer roller coasters at Carowinds that opened in 2019. Now, to describe the ride experience, it starts with a rare JoJo roll, which is a fun name for an element. I love that name. But it is a heartline roll that happens right when you exit the station. So when you begin the ride, instead of just taking a turn and then getting ready for a launch or for your lift hill, instead you get right into the action by doing a little heartline roll right out of the gate. You also get to experience multiple LSM launches, 2 to be specific, and then you have 2 vertical loops with a major emphasis on hang time. In addition, you have some other inversions, including a corkscrew, a cutback, which is like a corkscrew that enters the same way it exits, and then also multiple bank turns and airtime hills. And then, of course, with the color scheme for Copperhead Strike, you got the nice copper color scheme. Of course, when it's called Copperhead, you might as well make the train color copper. You also have a very dark gray, dare I say, anthracite supports that hold up the trains and hold up the coaster as well. So like we mentioned in some of our earlier broadcasts and other episodes, I should say, you have a new wave that is happening right now in the coaster world, and it really is all about those launches. People got the need for speed, and without having to worry about chain lift, you can get up to speed and do any of the elements that you want to have. So there are a lot of rides where, you want to use tall elements, you want to do some cool things, but you need to have a lift hill that's tall enough to justify and give you enough speed to be able to clear some of these elements. But now if you utilize the launch technology that a lot of coasters are doing, especially the LSM style launches, which is linear synchronized motor launches, those people and those types of roller coasters, I should say, are able to get up to the speed that they want, get to try the different elements that they want, and I think it's really cool that Copperhead Strike takes advantage of that. You also have a great vibe with Copperhead Strike. It's kind of in its own little area in the back corner of the park, and it has a very old west sort of style theme. You kind of have these old sheds. It definitely has a nice vibe to it when you're going through the queue line and getting onto the roller coaster itself. Plus, again, another one where it feels like all families can ride this one because it's not too tall, it's not too high, but it has some loops that you could be able to use, and there's some cool elements that are mixed in there after the launches. But the main element that I believe this roller coaster excels at is hang time. I mentioned how the loops feature a lot of hang time, and a lot of times with roller coasters, when they go through inversions, they go through pretty quickly, so they kind of just roll through those inversions. But Copperhead Strike likes to keep you going nice and slow, just enough speed to clear these elements, and that leads to a lot of hang time, which is sort of that feeling of being out of your seat, but maybe more so in the upside down moments. You think about that JoJo roll, the way that you come out of the station and you go into an inversion, you're going probably no more than 10 or 15 miles per hour as you're going through that element. So it's a very slow paced element. So you feel yourself coming out of your seat. You feel your necklace, since I wore a necklace at the park, almost trying to fall off, which thankfully it didn't. And I feel like it's just such a cool way of doing it. You see that with the loops too, where they're just enough speed to get you through, but you kind of hang at the bottom of the loop. You hang at the bottom of the cutback. You hang during the corkscrew. It's so nice to get that feeling of pretty much upside down airtime. And I feel like Copperhead Strike, they excel, or this roller coaster, I should say, especially excels at that. Not to mention, I got to ride this roller coaster before I took a job with a team called the Southern Ohio Copperheads. So I'm a baseball broadcaster. I at least did a lot of baseball broadcasting during the summers throughout my college years, which are crazy enough coming to an end very soon. I'm almost graduated. But with the Copperheads, it was cool being able to reference the roller coaster whenever I was doing my broadcast, because I broadcasted for a team called the Copperheads and got to ride a roller coaster called Copperhead Strike. And to up the ante, the word strike is used in baseball quite a bit, of course. You can go down on strikes whenever you throw a pitch. It's either a ball or a strike or a base hit. And it's just cool being able to have that sort of roller coaster element be something that I rode, and a roller coaster name like that I rode right before taking that internship. So that's why Copperhead Strike, for all of those reasons, really stood out to me. Let's move on to our next coaster on the High Five.
But now next is, gotta ride that ride, gotta love it. It's a B&M. It's that B&M invert. Gotta love a strong B&M invert, and this one is Afterburn. Love this coaster. I haven't ridden it yet, but I know I'm gonna love it because I always love myself some B&M goodness. And this is about as good as it gets when it comes to B&M. The Afterburn. Gotta love that sign. I love that name. That is just a kick butt name for a roller coaster. Afterburn. All right, let's get into the queue line and let's give it a ride on this B&M invert. For my people at home, for my Ohio coaster people, this coaster is very similar to Banshee and Raptor. That's why you ride that ride. Yes, you gotta love the Afterburn. That was Afterburn. It was pretty damn good. I absolutely love that roller coaster. There's its sign again. The operations were a little bit slow, but that's okay. Not complaining, because it was absolutely terrific.
All right, it's time for Afterburn as our next roller coaster on the high five. This roller coaster reminds me of a Wii game I used to play with my friend called Blazing Angels, where you got to be a fighter pilot and you get to kind of mimic being in war. Afterburn sort of has that same sort of idea where it's kind of like that American World War sort of theme with Afterburn. I kind of like the aesthetic quite a bit. But this is a B&M steel inverted roller coaster celebrating a 25th year of operation, as it's been running since 1999. Happy birthday, Afterburn. And that's really good. 25 years of operation, pretty good. And it had multiple names over that time, too. It started off as Top Gun the Jet Coaster from 1999 to 2007. And then, of course, its name was later changed to Afterburn. That's not the only time we're going to see an example of a name being changed throughout it, hint, hint. Or I should say throughout this episode, hint, hint. As this is a 2 minute and 47 second ride with a height of 113 feet. You got a 62 mile per hour top speed. You pull some major G-force on this one, and it has 6 inversions. So to start off the ride experience, you go to the other back corner of the park. It's kind of the back left if you're going through the entrance. And you go all the way to the back of the park, and you have Afterburn with its gray track, kind of a darker gray sort of track, but they have painted it a little bit lighter gray since then. And then you have a nice blue supports kind of in between a royal and a navy. I wouldn't say it's exactly royal, a little bit darker than that, but it's not dark enough to be considered a navy as well. Kind of like a deep blue supports. And you start off the ride by going out of the station. You go down that 113-foot drop. It's a swooping drop, and you experience a vertical loop into a trench, an Immelman, which is like a half loop, followed by kind of a corkscrew coming out of it. Then you have a whippy 0G roll, which is where you kind of go up and then you do like a twist and then you go back down. I love 0G rolls, my personal favorite inversion. You have an intense bat wing, which again, sort of similar to like an Immelman and a dive loop. It's a corkscrew that goes into a half loop and then a half loop that goes out into a corkscrew so that it exits the same way that it came in. And then you have a tunnel under a pathway, you got a corkscrew, and you also have a helix as well too. So a lot going on with Afterburn. It's a very strong and compact layout. It's also a very whippy ride, and it's really an underrated roller coaster when it comes to being a B&M invert. And I think that every park needs a good B&M invert. And if you want to know how to make a good roller coaster, a good B&M invert, Afterburn, I feel like is one of the truest examples of it. It's that old school B&M where, you know, maybe there's some elements that are a little bit shaky every once in a while, but I feel like Afterburn still is running very smooth no matter that the fact that it is 25 years old. Kind of similar to Raptor in a lot of vibes, but I just think it actually has better elements and better inversion choices than Raptor. I always love Raptor's loop into 0G roll, and then the Cobra roll is pretty good too. But I think the elements and the intensity of Afterburn, when you add in the fact that it also packs in an Immelman and also packs in that bat wing, I think that also gives Afterburn the edge. Also, the aesthetic, I think, is very nice, too. When you're going in to the station, you kind of see a lot of those, like, military base type of theming. It feels like you are in a fighter jet. And one of my favorite movies is Valiant, which is a Disney movie kind of themed to the messenger pigeons. And it kind of has that sort of same effect where it's like a World War II, you're drafted, you're going to be a fighter pilot. It has that sort of aesthetic to it, which made it really attractive of a roller coaster to me. And then also it's a very underrated roller coaster in the fact that when people talk about the best B&M inverts, you usually hear people talk a lot about Raptor or Montu or Banshee or Alpengeist. Not enough people talk about Afterburn. So I'm glad to be able to give this ride a shout out. A fantastic ride that showcases what you can do with a strong and compact layout. This is one of the few rides of the B&Ms that are at Carowinds. Of the 4 of them, this one is probably the most compact, and that leads to a lot of intensity and how it preserves space, where you put it in the back corner of the park and it keeps up the space and gives you a lot of more room to be able to add other types of additions because it's not as sprawn out. So Afterburn, very impressive to me. Let's move on to the 4th one on our high five.
Intimidator, which is the B&M Hyper. That's Diamondback's younger brother. Opened in 2010, Diamondback is 2009. They saw how successful Diamondback was, and they're like, hey, let's get one of them at Carowinds. So there's Intimidator, themed to Dale Earnhardt, AKA the Intimidator. We're at Intimidator right now. There it is, 232 feet up. And then you're gonna drop, do a little bank turn, some airtime hills, gotta love it. Some good old B&M Hyper coaster goodness here at Carowinds. Road Intimidator, aka Intimidator, as it's known in the coaster community, and that's a little bit of a derogatory term towards roller coasters, because it was great. You know, it's trim brake. People say it ruins the airtime. I don't think it ruins the airtime. I think it at least adds to it. It makes it go over a little bit slower, and you still get airtime the whole time. I think that was not just good, but terrific. Really great coaster on Intimidator, and I think it's right on par with Diamondback. It's not. I think the only thing that gives Diamondback an edge right now is the splashdown. That's it. That's literally the only difference that I'd say puts them apart. So I'd probably give Diamondback the edge, and also my Ohio bias, I'll give him the edge for that. But Intimidator has great airtime. That is solid B&M hyper action.
Moving on to our next roller coaster, it is Intimidator, now known as Thunder Striker. As of 2024, Carowinds did announce a name change from Intimidator to Thunder Striker. As for the base stats, Intimidator is a B&M hyper coaster that is 232 feet tall with a 211-foot drop at a 71-degree angle, not too shabby. You got the maximum speed of 75 miles per hour, and it's a long ride with a 3-minute and 33-second duration. So, hey, it's got 8 more seconds than Fury 325. How about that? This ride is overflowing with airtime as it has 8 drops, one of 211 feet, another is 178 feet, 151 feet for the third, 105 for the fourth, 90 feet for the fifth, 62 feet for the sixth, 52 feet for the seventh, and 48 feet for the last hill. And this one opened in 2010 and is a newer ride, kind of themed to Dale Earnhardt Jr., which is the famous NASCAR driver, but it looks like Cedar Fair has lost that licensing, so that's why we're seeing the name change from Intimidator over to Thunder Striker, which, to be honest, is not my favorite name in the world. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well as Intimidator, but it is a little bit more unique of a name, to be fair. And I call this ride experience is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This ride came in to really become the high headline attraction when Carowinds was first bought by Cedar Fair. They saw how well Diamondback did at Kings Island, and they were like, hey, let's put in another B&M hyper coaster. This time, let's do this at Carowinds in 2010 and make it very similar. And this ride, it's pretty repetitive, but again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. These airtime hills and airtime elements are great because most of the time, like I mentioned with the hills, you're going up and you're doing airtime hills pretty often. The only exceptions you have are after the first drop, you do a little turnaround to the 90-degree angle so that you can go and do your out and back segment. And then you have one little turnaround element that sends you back the same direction that you came. And then you also have a little helix and a mid-course brake run at some point as well, too. So there are some switch-ups in the lineup, but for the most part, you're going to be experiencing just really solid, consistent, good floater airtime. And I think Intimidator does a great job. I don't think it's as good as some of the other hypers I've ridden, such as Diamondback that I mentioned before in 2009, which also, like Diamondback, Intimidator does have kind of stadium-style seats where it has rows of 2 essentially, where you have 2 people sitting close together, and then right behind them you have 2 people that are kind of out on, like, I wouldn't call them wing seats, but you're farther out wide and have a unimpeded view of the train as it goes down, which I think is really cool. But going on back to the name change and the re-theme, it's a big question in Cedar Fair, especially now that they have Six Flags, to have an IP or not. You have so many name, images, and likenesses and IPs that you can use for your roller coasters. So why not try to take advantage of that and utilize your intellectual properties if you can? And I feel like there are some more creative names that could have came about than Thunder Striker, and they could have taken a little bit more time to come up with that name. It feels like a lot of people have not received it pretty well. Also, another thing is how do people separate the Carowinds when it comes to Intimidator versus Fury 325? And I think they did a good job with them being made by the same company, them being pretty similar in terms of the fact that they want to have a lot of high elements and a lot of hills. You want to have some bank turns. You want to mix and match all of that. And I think Fury 325, some people may say it's repetitive to Intimidator, but I think it's enough differences. I think Fury 325 does a much better job of having those low to the ground elements, a lot more different varieties of bank turns that help you feel the speed. While Intimidator, it's a floater airtime machine. So I think it does a good job. But I think also another criticism in the coaster community is do layouts become too cookie cutter? And I think Intimidator is maybe an example of what people consider the most cookie cutter B&M hyper coaster out there. But I think the biggest thing to summarize it, as I mentioned earlier, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Intimidator does a phenomenal job of being consistent as all get up.
One's gonna be my 80th roller coaster here. Actually, I almost called it Carolina Cobra, which Carolina Cobra is right next door. Carowinds loves their alliterations with the C letters, of course. So Carolina Cyclone, Carolina Cobra. Gotta love those coaster names. I love it. There it is with its new color scheme. It looks very nice with that paint scheme. Bright teal. It's like a mixture of the Carolina Panthers blue and the Jacksonville Jaguars color. Or maybe it is just straight up the Jacksonville Jaguars teal. There it is, the Carolina Cyclone. That coaster, a little janky, a little rough around the edges. That's what you expect from 1980s coaster action. They repainted it so it looks good on the bright side. Literally the bright side, because this color scheme is quite bright. I love it, love it, love it. But that was coaster number 80 for me. They got bees out here too, that's interesting. Yeah, it's number 80. Can't be mad at that. That's a really great coaster milestone. And it'll be this corkscrew clone that will be always known as my 80th coaster.
For our last roller coaster of the High Five segment, we're going to talk about Carolina Cyclone. For the base stats of this roller coaster, it's an aerodynamic steel roller coaster, and it's an oldie as it opened in 1980. But it got a couple of repaints over the years, so it started off as blue, then it moved to orange and yellow, and now it's a nice teal color, pretty similar to Fury 325. The height is 95 feet tall for this ride with a 41 mile per hour max speed. You also got 4 inversions, including 2 vertical loops and a pair of corkscrews. When it comes to the ride experience, this classic corkscrew model, it's seen in a lot of places, and it can be very familiar, especially for people who are traveling. So let's say you're a person who maybe lived in Ohio, went to Cedar Point, you moved down to North Carolina, which a lot of people are moving into North Carolina these days. And you go to Carowinds and you see another corkscrew style roller coaster and it's familiar to you. You're like, hey, I remember this roller coaster. This is very similar to the corkscrew at Cedar Point. So it brings that sort of familiarity, especially given how many versions of this roller coaster are everywhere. You take a look at, Great Escape, they have a version of this. Michigan's Adventure, they have a version of this roller coaster too. So that familiarity, it can pay huge dividends in terms of people being able to approach these different roller coasters. I think also, of course, the name Carolina Cyclone came with this ride, but you also have an NHL reference that's sort of built in because the local team is called the Carolina Hurricanes, and you know how much of a sucker I am for sports team references with team names, and Carolina Cyclone does a little bit of that by talking about the Carolina Hurricanes and Cyclones not too far apart. Now, the main reason why Carolina Cyclone stood out to me, because in general, it's an okay ride experience, not the best roller coaster, a little bit of rough around the edges, but I think still decent enough. But the main reason I wanted to mention that is there's a trio of rides throughout the history that are also themed to the Carolinas alongside Carolina Cyclone that evoke state pride. And I love when parks do this, especially when you have a park where it's split, where there's literally half the parks in North Carolina, other half of the parks in South Carolina. Some of the rides actually go over multiple states, such as Fury 325, which goes over North Carolina and South Carolina. You want to evoke that state pride while also not having one have to outshine over the other. Unfortunately, for the Carolinas, when you have a state that has one side that's the north part of the state, other side which is the south part of the state, it really is cool that you can be able to unite them with the word that is shared, which is Carolina. You think about some of the rides in the past. Thunder Road, that is a defunct roller coaster, so it doesn't exist anymore. However, it was a racing roller coaster where one side was North Carolina, other side was South Carolina. And I thought that was really fun. What a concept, because you could have somebody who's from North Carolina, and then you have a group of people from South Carolina, and they want to ride each side of the roller coaster and try to win the race for their side of the state. You also got the Carolina Cobras, which is another roller coaster at the park, and then Carolina Gold Rusher. So I think Carowinds does a good job of celebrating your region, and that's what you really want to do with your amusement park too. So it's one thing to have some great rides, to be a great destination for everybody, but you also want to make sure that you're really marketing towards your local crowd, because these are the people that are going to be coming multiple times throughout a season compared to some of your other visitors that are only going to come maybe once or twice every single season. So making sure that you have rides that are themed to the Carolinas, that have references to your history of your state, I think it is an absolute brilliant move for Carowinds. So that's why I wanted to mention Carolina Cyclone, while also giving a shout out to rides like Carolina Cobra and Carolina Gold Rusher, and then rest in peace to the defunct roller coaster Thunder Road. But that'll do it for the High Five segment. For the last segment of the show, we're going to have a little chat on what it means to go to a park by yourself and how you can be able to make the most out of your day with those circumstances. So I think there's a couple of things and a couple of insecurities that stop people from going to the park solo, especially when it's a full day. I know for me personally, I went to parks like Kings Island by myself, but only for very small portions of time. So for maybe 1 or 2 hours, ride a ride or two, get some food, and then go back to spend some time with my girlfriend or my family. But in this case, with Carowinds, I was there at the park 2 full days by myself. So that was certainly a different experience. But I think the first thing you want to do, address the insecurities, which certainly come to mind whenever you go anywhere alone. It's kind of like how nowadays people are trying to normalize going to movie theaters alone, which should already be something that should be normalized. Same thing with going to baseball games alone or going to anything that you want alone. There's actually a lot of joy to traveling by yourself every once in a while too. So first, there's that self-consciousness sense where as you're walking around, you might think about, oh, what if this person is thinking I'm lonely or thinking I'm not a cool person or something like that because I'm going to a park by myself. You also have the loneliness factor, which I will say I did feel a little bit of that maybe my second day at the park where I did want to meet some other people. And then also you have the long drive solo, which is not always the easiest thing in the world, but I do like listening to my podcast and my music. So I quite enjoy the drive back up to Athens, Ohio after I was done. But with these insecurities, I mean, again, all of these do make sense and they're natural things to have. But there are some joys that really come with these parks. First of all, you get to make your own decisions and go at your own pace, which is very empowering. So when you come to the park, you can get there as early as you want. You can stay as late as you would like to get into that park. You can be able to go do the roller coasters that you want, do them as many times as you want. So like Fear 325, if you want to wake up in the morning and ride that 5 times in a row, you could ride that 5 times in a row. It's also very peaceful as well too, where you get to make your own decisions. There's not too much discussion about what to do next, and you really just kind of get to focus on yourself. I spent a lot of time being able to control my own experience too. So I got to go take videos, take a lot of audio for this podcast, for example, and just got to enjoy the ambiance of the park, sitting down, listening to the music that was around the park, listening to shows, looking at the beauty of the park, taking videos, taking pictures of all the roller coasters, and then experiencing all the roller coasters for the first time. You also get to do a good job of making friends, which I think is a skill that is quite lost in this day and age too, because if you think about it, it is hard to be able to make friends, especially since a lot of us spend a lot of time on social media or make friends with people that are just in our area and kind of share similar circumstances to what we do. And I find it very interesting that at the park, I got to meet a lot of other coaster enthusiasts and a lot of other people that really loved roller coasters, and people maybe who weren't as big of fans of roller coasters, but just seemed like cool people that I was waiting in line with and had great conversations with. I got to talk with multiple people that were traveling from different states, such as traveling up from Alabama. I got to see father-daughter duos. I got to talk with sibling duos, got to talk with couples. It was a great balance and great variety of people that I got to meet throughout my time, and I got to hear about their stories. They got to hear about my story and why I'm here. We all come from different places, and it's a great way to get to know people and feel more confident in your social skills. And like I said, you get to build conversation skills as a result. So what I overall thought of going to the park solo, I think it is 100% worth it, and I recommend this experience for everybody. And I still think there are people, if you're introverted, you might even like this experience more, where there are times you can put in your headphones or put in your headset and you can just listen to music when you're at the park, which for me, I came in with some zipper pants, so I got to put all my stuff in my zipper pants. So I had my phone, I had my headphones, I had my charger, so that I could be able to listen to music while I was in line for some of the longer lines at the park, which I thought was a really fun thing to do as well. So again, I recommend the opportunity to go to a park solo, and I'm really glad that I got to take some time during this podcast to talk a little bit about that experience. So that's all the time we have here today for the Coaster Broadcast Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Back on Track Coasters on Instagram for photos and videos from trips updates on the podcast, and a ton of other great amusement park related content. As for me, this is your voice of Coaster Broadcast Podcast, Sedric Granger, signing off.